Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. I'm your host, Christine Devlin Eck. Here at the Center for Sacred Window Studies, we explore and expand on conscious postpartum care. We navigate the overlap of caring for others and caring for ourselves. We honor the transitions, not only in giving birth, but in being alive. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Christine. I'm the host of the Sacred Window podcast. It's so lovely to be here today. Today we're talking about being and becoming, navigating the corporate world as a new parent, navigating that professional space while still nurturing and learning how to be a parent. This is a huge and important topic, and I'm so blessed to invite my guest here. Msulle Kibelloh is someone who has joined our community who has such important perspective to share on this topic and many others. Msulle is a multidimensional being. I love that in your bio. She's a daughter, sister, wife to a beautiful soul, mama to 3 luminous boys, and a friend. She is an avid reader and lover of ancient traditional knowledge. She holds a master's in political economy and development and specializes in HR, leadership development, and coaching. Msulle is passionate about helping women thrive as they navigate parenthood in and outside of the workplace. And she lives in Copenhagen, Denmark. She's lived all around the world. She has a very unique story. Msulle, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Christine.
This is such an important topic, and it's one that came up a lot in my work with groups of new parents, that blending of who we were and who we are now as a parent, especially as a first-time parent. Share a little bit about your story and your experience of that you worked so hard to create this professional identity, and then you became a parent. What was your experience?
That is such a deep question because I am still unfolding when I think about my experience when I first became a mama. And this takes me, so my son turns 10 this year. So we're looking back 10 years ago, and oh boy, what a journey. I would say at the beginning, I was kind of in the mindset as everyone else. You're in the workplace, you work hard in your role, and you have this idea that you were gonna, advance to the next level, you get promoted, that kind of thing. And then I find out I'm pregnant. I was just full of joy because I always knew I wanted to be a mama. So it wasn't a shock to the system. I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? But when I looked around me, not many women my age were expecting babies. I was working in the financial sector at the time. And so I kind of did what everyone else did. I worked up until I think month 7, right? And reading lots. So I felt like because I was excited, I wanted to learn as much as I could. I read a lot of books about pregnancy and followed the different milestones, and was still kind of keeping level head at work and, doing what I needed to do, but very excited about the process. And then what I did notice, though, it was almost a solo journey. As I said, not many women my age were having babies at that time. And it was kind of seen as career suicide in a way. You could say that, right? So yeah, and then this baby comes, and oh my God, my whole world is turned upside down. Because first of all, I didn't have the vocabulary I have now. I didn't have it then, of what that transition was like, right? So first you have to transition from working and then saying, okay, I'm going to have this beautiful baby. What kind of mindset do I need to be in that space on all levels, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, right? So I think when I look back now, it was very textbook like for me. You know, I knew what to expect in theory. I thought I was prepared in theory, and everything got thrown upside down. You know, this baby arrives, and looking around, going, okay, what are my tools? Like, what do I do? Because in the workplace, you live you very much above the heart, right, in the head. And it was just very interesting. Just a lot of things, just having to unlearn and relearn, and I would say parent myself as well in the process, you know. So it was a beautiful shock to the system. And then I was kind of looking back thinking, "Ooh, this is not happening as per the textbook, you know. When I read this book, this is not happening per this." But what really struck me was this beautiful balance between having this new soul in our arms and our family dynamics changing forever, you know, from two to three, to that whole process of becoming a mother. What are the stories I had? What are the frameworks I had versus what I wanted to implement and learn as I went along? So some of it was a blur, and some of it was, wow, the reality of having a child, of birthing a being, is very different from what you read in books. So I felt more prepared pre-labor than, you know, in the postpartum stage. And it's funny, I can laugh about it now, but it was, you know, at times very challenging because you don't really know what you don't know. So you're kind of doing the best you can. And then there were times when you're like, oh, but the book says this, or the medical staff say this, and I should do this. And it can be quite confusing and unsettling. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like any kind of expectation about what it's going to be like is a
Yeah.
little bit dangerous to have because it's characterized like becoming a parent is characterized by like surprises. We don't know what it's actually going to be like. As I was listening to you, I was thinking back to a conversation that I had with my neighbor when we had our first babies close together. My first was born, and I remember talking to them in the backyard, maybe a few months later, and they were expecting theirs. And I remember he said to me, well, it seems like you guys got it figured out. Like you didn't like disappear. Like you're still like going, and doing things. And he was really fixated on how his life didn't have to change when he became a
Mm-hmm.
parent. Like he was really holding tight to, I still want to be me. I still want to do the things that we like to do, and kind of looking for affirmation different places. But to be honest, for us, we were trying to do some of that also, but it kind of didn't feel good. It was like any
Mm-hmm.
kind of, stretch that we put us through, like, oh, we can bring our baby to this thing that we want to do, or we can still try to go to this event, or, practice this type of routine. Um, it kind of just felt excruciatingly hard. And I wonder if we can, like, embrace that unknown. It seems like it requires a lot of forethought and flexibility and surrender to the unknown, um, in order for it to be and feel more smooth.
Mm. Surrender. Surrender, I think, is something that I'm still learning. And I like what you said about flexibility because it does require this sort of almost like a floating state of mind of, hey, I noticed this. Can I learn from it? What do I like about this? What do I not like? And letting go. There has to be some kind of fluidness. Is that a word? Yeah. It needs to flow. And I think when you're a new mother, especially a new parent, there's a lot of milestones that you have to keep in mind. And it starts from the very beginning, from even before the baby arrives. So are you at the right weight? Are you, at these certain parameters kept, and are they within line? And when baby's born, what's the baby's weight? And are they losing weight? Are they gaining weight? And they should be doing this at this time. So there are a lot of metrics that you keep up with. And I guess it depends with the country, right? That you have the baby. When I had my first baby in the UK, it was very much like that. But then my third baby in Denmark, and it was very much a hands-off experience, almost like we acknowledge that birth is not a it's not a sickness, it's not an illness, go with the flow and call us if anything happens, right? So that was a very different approach. But with my first baby, it was, as you say, it felt a little bit like there was a little bit of friction internally as well as friction with the outside world. And then in that space, there's a lot of discovery, but it can happen if you're not willing to let go of certain things, of your ideas, of your textbook definitions of how things should look, and have space for welcoming the new. And I think that's where the surrendering comes in. You have to let something go. And sometimes it could be an identity of self, an identity or a standard of what is. And I think we get in trouble, and I can speak with my lived experience, when we try and slot ourselves back into what was without realizing that this is a new paradigm. Everything is different. And can I welcome that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a, takes such consciousness, such forethought to be able to have those inner processes before our babies are born, especially when it's not mirrored by the workplace that we're in. It's not mirrored by the culture that we're in. It's largely unacknowledged, that inner process that we know now because we're in the field that we're in, this conscious
Mm-hmm.
care. Like, we know, we can see it and talk about it, but for people to actually have the toolkit to do that, when the expectations around us that we feel from our professional worlds, that we feel from the priorities of society in general, um, carry a lot of weight, which is interpreted as pressure to experience something a certain way or handle something a certain way, to handle that transition to parenthood in a way that keeps us feeling powerful in the workplace, keeps us feeling productive and in tune with all the skills that we've built up that have served us in different capacities.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember we talked a couple of weeks ago, and I remember part of that conversation that sticks out to me is you describing bringing your firstborn to the child care center that was in the workplace, and your experience of bringing him there and dropping him off for the first time, and like, talk about how you felt at that moment. I felt like, to me, when you were describing it, it was almost, it was an awakening for you.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. And when I think back to that moment, it's interesting because every time I go back, I pick up something different, right? And the nursery was actually not far from the workplace. The workplace did have a nursery downstairs in the building. But it was, you had to be pretty organized to get in with the waiting list and everything else.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. I'm bad at those.
When you live in London, nursery places are hot stuff. So I remember going with my 6-month-old, and they were like, you needed to be here before baby was born. Thinking, note for next time. Thank you for letting me know. But yes, so it was close to where I worked. And I think I don't know what I was expecting, but I thought it would be this smooth transition, this next step, baby going off to nursery, and then I would go off to work, and we'll kind of work it out, right? And I was not prepared for what I had experienced. And it was almost this separation because I'd been with my baby, and we're lucky in Europe, we get a year maternity leave, right? So we'd been together that whole time. And this is why I think back, I'm thinking, I don't know what I was thinking. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I didn't think it would be that difficult. Leaving my firstborn and just like walking away from the nursery and finding a bench. I think it was a bench, maybe it was a chair, something to sit on, and just crying because he was screaming and I didn't know how else to do it. We did have, I think it was 2 days of settling, but it's a couple of hours here and there. This was going to be the whole day. And it was a part of it was a blur because I remember just going outside and crying and I didn't even really care about who was around me. It was just this emotion that had to run through me. And then after I finished, I picked myself up and I went to the train station and I went to work like nothing happened, right? And I know I am not alone in that experience where there is I wouldn't say suppression, but there is you tuck your little experiences and emotions, whether they're digested or not, within yourself. You put them in a little shelf or suitcase and you go and you do what you need to do, right? And then you come back and sometimes you unpack it in the evening when you come pick up your babies. Then you do what you need to do at home. So there's this separation. There isn't a merge of the person you're being and becoming as a parent, as a mother. We almost don't know how to marry the two together. We keep them very separate. And I think that separation causes a lot of hardship within us as women, as mothers, because we don't only exist in one dimension or one paradigm, one story, one, setting. I think we exist in many different settings. And I think what I'm learning now is the more we can integrate all those different parts of us and our experiences, I think that's where the richness of life is. Because you have a wider toolbox or framework to pick from and to lean on, I think, to draw from. Yeah.
It feels like it's a defense mechanism to like, okay, this is my moment. I'm going to cry and let it out and I'm going to be here. Okay, that's done. Now I'm going to move into this hat and go to do this work. And then I'm going to put that down and then I'm going to come back. And it's like we put everything in neat little compartments that don't blend. And then how could we possibly expect to feel like a whole being when we're just allowing ourselves to be little separated characters within our whole sense of self? And I think
Mm.
that's part, really the heart of like what this conversation is like, how do we create bridges along those or like merge them so that we can still feel like a whole person?
That's an interesting concept. I think two things come to mind. One is that sometimes it's not safe to integrate all those different aspects of yourself and your your experiences and beliefs and values and bring them to a certain setting, right? That's one. The second is mostly these days we parent alone. I mean, if you have a community of people who can hold you and say, hey, it might feel rough on day one or week one, given the lifestyle that you're in. Some women choose not to work and they're able not to, and that's a beautiful thing for some, and for most people, they need to go to work. But if you have a community of people who can say, hey, maybe I went through that, or I see you and I can hold space for you, I think that experience becomes lighter. And we live in a world now where people are putting up the best pictures of their experiences. So you could easily sit there and feel like you are probably the worst mother in the world, or your world is caving in and everyone else is fine, you know? So I wanted to mention those two things because they're very real.
Yeah, yeah, they're very,
Mm,
very real. In a place and a time where there's so much connection and information, um, people can feel more alone and separate than ever. And I think this also comes back to, workplaces. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, it's so dependent on where we live in the world, what the social structure is around supporting new families to like become.
mhm.
And it depends on workplaces. Certain workplaces are going to have more set up to support that than others.
Yes.
But one thing that really I have thought about since we had our first conversation is
Mm,
your mentoring. You're doing like professional mentoring in your human resources, aspect of your work, where you were
mhm,
sitting down and kind of helping people to become their best self. And I think
mm,
that experience that you've had doing that lends itself really beautifully to working with new families and helping people to feel like the multi-dimensional beings that they are and celebrate
mhm,
those and be able to feel free to be that multi-dimensional being in a place where maybe they feel like they have to only look one way.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so
mhm,
I would love to hear a little bit about how you've seen that. I feel like it takes skill to be able to work with someone one on one and be able to spot what it is that's standing in their way of being the full, beautiful person that they are. So I'm curious about your process and how you would work with people and be able to spot that.
mhm,
And then translating that into the rest of us. Like, how can we all sort of become the fullness of who we are as parents and as people with professional skills that we love? And yeah, yeah. Tell me about this work that you've done with people.
I love that question. I love that question because the way I see my role, my work as a coach, and my role as a human resource partner or business partner is that I'm really a guide in people's journeys, right? And I I almost allow them to remember what it is they're about or what they're curious about moving forward, using their talents, their gifts, um, their motivations, right? And so I just kind of shine a light to these areas that, again, they may be put in little neat boxes tucked away somewhere. So I just kind of point at them, shine a light, or bring some attention to those areas and let people uncover their own boxes. So that's what I do, right? And your first question about the workplace, how I kind of uncover that is connection. And it's something a lot of people are afraid of, especially in the workplace, because hey, it can go very wrong. It can. But I look at it as something that is very delicate. It's like a dance, you know? When you open yourself up with curiosity, with the intention of fully seeing somebody else, then that gives them permission to open up just a little bit. So, for instance, I could work with someone at work and it could be something around, well, I'd like to increase my confidence around speaking up in meetings. You know, I have something to say, but I find that because I'm not as junior as, I don't know, Tom, I hold back my opinions and, you know, I talk myself out of suggesting a better idea or something that could work. So we go into these sessions saying, okay, so self-confidence is the thing that brought you here. Let's look at what you're about. You know, who are you? What do you want? What are your values? What's important to you? And that is where it's so juicy and meaty, because then we get into the essence of who that person is, because the thing that they're working on is a byproduct of what they're about, what they are creating on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis. And we take maybe around 3 to 4 sessions of that. And sometimes we peel the layers and it comes down to something as subtle yet powerful like love. I operate this way because I realized that really what I wanted was to be loved by my mother, my father, my caregiver. Or I once spoke out in primary school and was laughed at. And so there was a block there. Even though the thing could be starting off with self-confidence or speaking out in meetings. So I get a lot of joy and energy from peeling those layers to get to the seed of the thing that is at stake or at core, or the thing that is really the heart of the problem. And then that's where the work begins. And it's so beautiful because in allowing and giving permission to people to speak up, sometimes it's the first time they've ever mentioned or acknowledged it out loud to somebody. And you can just see when that moment comes up. And then we start looking at, okay, what does this mean? Where do we want to take it? All right, then let's look at tools. And I always start simple, not more than 3 things. And then we monitor that over a course, of usually it's 3 months. And it's little things that they just do each time. And then there's a huge element of celebration. So I have a little formula I use called the 4 C's. The first C is clarify. Clarify what's important to you. What do you care about? How do you see the world from your prism, right? And then from there, you start getting information. Some people don't really know. I say, okay, how do you spend your time, energy, and money? You'll get a lot of data there. Go through your bank account. Look at how you spend your time. You can even have a little log, right? And energy, what energizes you, right? That will all clarify what you're about, what your values are, what you care about. The second C is communication. Communicate what those things are. And again, you don't have to have a whole list of 10 things, just top 3 things. If quality time, family time is important to you, right? Do the people that you want to spend quality time with know? Right? And the biggest piece here is communicating that to yourself, giving yourself permission to say, this is important to me. Because you are a co-creator in that, in that whole process. The third C is commitment. Now that you know what's important to you, you have communicated it out to other people, whether that be, hey, I've done a lot of soul searching. These are the things that have come up for me. How do you see that on your end? I'd like to make these changes, or making an offer. Quality time with you is important to me. Would you be willing to spend 5 hours a week with me, walking in the park, going shopping, whatever it is, right? That could be communicating to yourself or making an offer to someone else. Committing is the third C, committing, commitment. What is one thing I can do that puts me on the path of what it is that I value? One thing, that could be one thing a week, one thing a day, one thing a month. Okay. But really putting, I think one of the coaches, Lisa Nichols, says it's matching the tongue in your mouth with the tongue in your shoe, right? Walking the talk.
I
Yes.
love that.
Yes. So one little thing, and this is not to be a stressful kind of to-do list, just one tiny thing because it's in the doing, in the movement of what it is that you are desiring is where the joy is, right? And then lastly, the fourth C is celebration. Every time you do something, no matter how big, how small, to celebrate yourself, because often we can be really resentful when we have a lot on our plate and we are waiting for someone else to go, good job, or I know that was hard for you, well done, or I see you. See yourself first. And this was a very hard one for me to understand because, as I said earlier, we parent in most cases alone. Nobody really sees how messy it can get. So, because you are in it, you are in the trenches, the highs and the lows, you are the best person to go, you know what? I tried there. Oh, I said I would do this and I did it. Good job.
Yeah.
Or I didn't do that. I'll try again tomorrow. It's okay. It's okay.
Mm. I love these C's so much. I think that this in general is like a process of realignment and gratitude. And this
Mm.
is like the daily path, for just being a whole person in general, like getting to the heart of who am I? What do I want? What is most important to me? And then talking about it, writing it out, like letting other people know, like this is you know, whether it's my spouse or like my children or my boss, like let's get other people on board. And then it's like the commitment, like doing it, putting, the tongue in your mouth with the tongue in your shoes, like one little thing, like an action step to like affirm that and making sure that we're doing what is most in alignment with us, and then taking the time to be really grateful and happy and like letting that energy flow into the universe that says, yes, this is what I want, this is how I want to feel, this is what I want to be doing. And then all of a sudden it it becomes more natural. um, it's so beautiful. Yeah. And I feel like
Yeah,
this process becomes applicable to all areas of our life.
absolutely. And I love the word you use there, affirmation, because in doing, you collect evidence of yourself in action. So it's like filling your bank account with currency. And all you need to do is if for whatever reason you're withdrawing a lot more than you put in, you can put it back in there, right? It's a huge confidence booster. It is permission to celebrate the now. Yeah. And it's a way of remembering because we do stumble and there are times where it's hard. And sometimes you just need a reminder. And I think it also goes up. These four C's work um in both directions. Sometimes you need to go back to the first one, which is to clarify, hey, I've tried a few things. I'm not sure they work for me. Permission to pivot. Please do. Go back and clarify, what do I need in this moment, in this season, this year? What does that look like? Right? And then you could add another C, which is community. And I know that's a luxury for some people, but with modern technology, community can look like so many different things. I mean, the community we have here is one of them. It could be a virtual community. It can be, however you want to imagine it. Some people are better with people in person. I get that, right? But who can hold you accountable as you hold space for them? Who can you learn from? Do you have any mentors? And they could be people who live in books. They can be authors, you know? I have so many teachers, half whom I've never met and don't know I exist, but I learn so much from them. So what kind of community can you cultivate and build just to enrich your life experience?
It's so interesting how going through this process, like journaling maybe about our own four C's and like getting clear on what it is that is important to us, the way that we want to be moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting how easy it is to act in discord with what we really want. We may
Mm-hmm.
not even do it consciously, but like if our mission is to, you know, experience a type of mindset to, take time to be more present in, both our home life and also our professional life, but then we maybe make like kind of mini decisions during the day that like kind of push us farther. Maybe it's like 5 minutes too much on the phone and all of a sudden our heads are spinning from social media, the pit of social media. Or maybe it's, yeah, I don't even know, but it seems like it can be really easy with the spaces that we're in to become
Mm-hmm.
out of alignment with what we know is what we want. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious for you, when you are kind of taken out of, you go through a rocky patch, like you don't feel like you're on, you don't feel clear, you don't feel like you're communicating what is in alignment for you, you don't feel like you're taking action steps that are in alignment with that, you don't feel like you're celebrating. Like for you, in your experience, how do you press that reset and like get yourself back into a place where you feel like you're connected with what's right for you?
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. So previously, I would lash out because it's this internal existence that I almost just want to get rid of it, you know? It's like, take it out, put it somewhere. I don't know. What I'm learning now is this idea of getting quiet. And I liked what you said earlier about how we can go off track and that might not, like, you're doing something that maybe is taking you further away from the thing you said you wanted. But what I'm also learning is that there are two major driving forces, right? Comfort and discomfort. Every time we feel that something is giving us comfort in the moment, we do more of it. So if you're scrolling on social media and that feels good and you should be asleep and it feels good, well, that's what you're going to keep doing. But in the long term, it places you in that place of discomfort, right? And I know this word gets thrown on around a lot, guilt, mama guilt, or, feeling guilty of this and that. But it does require discipline. And at the time it's probably not easy, but it is that self-affirming action you spoke about, as in, I know I could be here for another 2 hours, but what I really want is to feel good about what I'm doing right now. Or I would know I can benefit from more rest. So how about we park this and come back to it tomorrow? Maybe tomorrow I'll do another half an hour as a treat to myself. Doing it consciously, right? It's a very different feeling when you do something consciously versus something that is almost taking over. It has control over you. You feel like a victim.
Mm,
So
mhm.
sometimes that could look like, hey, I'm giving myself permission to change my intention around this. I said I'll be here an hour. I'm going to do an hour and a half. But when the hour and a half is over, then can I be disciplined enough to kind of honor that? So it is almost retrusting yourself and filling that bank account I said before. Because every time you take from it, then you can't even trust yourself. You sit there and you go, yeah, last time I was here 3 hours, might be 4 hours. Then you just lose control and it spirals out of, it goes into places you probably don't want to go to. Coming back to the other part of your question of how do you kind of bring yourself back on track, as it were. I'm learning to be quiet, and oh my goodness, sometimes it is very, very uncomfortable, you know, and asking yourself, what do you want? And how have you participated in this funk? Because most of the time you have. And then being gentle, because it could be, hey, I did that because I didn't want to think about this thing. It was uncomfortable. Okay, and can you be gentle with that? Because most of us would beat ourselves up about it. Oh, there you go again. You said you wanted, you weren't going to spend 2 hours. You spent five. Oh my gosh, you are so horrible and the world's going to cave over. That's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. So quietness, and I like walking in nature because there are multiple things happening. My mind is left to wander in this expansive state, and I'm being soothed at the same time, whether it be the sounds in nature, the birds, the wind, the sound of my feet hitting the ground, the trees. So that is how I kind of bring myself back to center. And sometimes it works better than other times. Other times I still feel all over the place. And then I say, okay, can I be gentle with myself? Because sometimes it could be I need a hug in that moment, or I need a good cry, or I need to journal, or I need to spend time with my babies and my husband, or there is something that is bothering me that I haven't gone inward to look at, to release, or just observe. Sometimes you can't release things that easily, but there's a gentleness required that I am learning is not easy at times, but it's very necessary.
Mm, mm. And as somebody, who has been in corporate spaces, I have not worked in a corporate environment. So I'm very curious
Mm.
about, for people who are coming back to that environment after being at home and like welcoming a new baby, what are ways that they can create a more gentle transition that does give them the softness that is so beneficial in resetting what we know is important to us, who we know that we are? How can we navigate those dueling forces in a way?
Mm. I would say going back to the 4 C's and practicing that before going back to work, because I find a lot of women going back to work, they are changed, forever changed. When you birth a being, a soul, you cannot go back to the person you were. And so there's a lot of, for some women, there's a lot of grieving that needs to happen of who you were and who you are becoming, right? So the things that were important to you, could you reimagine them, reframe them, right? Into this new place that you are in. So, for instance, if you were an individual contributor in the corporate space and you go back and the company's moved on, maybe new people have been hired, some have been let go, maybe your position's changed. Can you give yourself permission to kind of reimagine where you thought you would be pre and post baby in that work setting, and how you're to move in that space? Because asking and communicating for what we need can be very difficult, or you come in as if nothing has happened, that you don't have all these other things going on in the background. For instance, childcare. Some parents are navigating school drop-offs and pickoffs, or if baby's sick. How does that fit in with the new paradigm that is the new, the role you're going into, whether it be your old role or a new role as this person with additional responsibilities? Boundary setting is another one. So if you practice communicating your needs, what is okay with you, what is not, from before going back to work, it's much easier to do that. So you go into a negotiation space as in, okay, what's required? Am I able to deliver that? And if not, can we reimagine what that could look like? So if I think, for example, some of the women that I've worked with before baby, long hours were okay, you know, taking work home. Post baby, you might need to negotiate that. Hey, my phone goes off at 6 o'clock because I need to be with my family. Anything that is pending, I will look at, maybe start work earlier from home. And then when I come in, I have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whenever that is. And of course, it helps having a manager or a team or a company that is responsive to these requests. But it's very hard for them to know what you need if you don't communicate that. And
Mm-hmm.
being flexible with how you negotiate these things. Because again, going and saying, well, I'm finishing at 5, so do you all, that might not work. So communicating, but that can only come from a place of clarity. What is it that you need? What is a non-negotiable? What is something you can flex with? What is something you can outsource if you're able to? And then knowing where to go if those things don't work. Is there a coach you can speak to? Do you have additional help somewhere? Do you have a mentor that you can speak to or can help you, can advocate on your behalf? So I would say start the prep work before you go back, because you'll be navigating so many different things. The change state emotionally, mentally as a mother. And you don't want that to be an additional weight in your existence. So as much as possible, do it before you start work. And then, use the HR department, if you have one, to ask questions, get clear on what the policies are, and ask. You will never know if it's possible if you don't ask, even if it's not in the handbook.
It's so aligned with, preparing for postpartum or, whatever it might be. Really, we're doing the same thing here. We want to make sure we have a safety net, make sure we are aware. I'll never forget that feeling of utter empowerment when I started learning Ayurvedic postpartum care, because now there were all these possibilities for approaching any potential discomfort that was going to come up. And this feels very similar.
Yes,
Like there could be any number of things that are going to be uncomfortable or conflicting when I go back into this routine. But if I have all the information, if I have this circle of helpers, of people who know what I'm thinking and feeling, what I'm nervous about, maybe, or what, is on my radar, that must totally change the experience of going back into that, because we feel resourced.
that's it. And the resource needs to also be internal, you know, coming back to what's important. What value do I have in the workplace and outside the workplace, right? But you have to see yourself, and that can take time. So this is also useful if you can work with a coach or a mentor or a good friend that can remind you of your brilliance, of your existence, right? Yes. As you fill your bank account of, every time you affirm yourself or move in action, you try something. But having someone who can hold you is so key. And that could be your husband or your partner or your, you know, whoever, your children sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So that work is necessary because it's also ongoing. And being open to change course, because sometimes we have a set idea of how things should look and be and feel, and we don't realize that other people have their own existence and things they need to take care of. So you'll find a lot of women who go back will say, this project landed on my desk, but my manager or my team know I have a baby. Well, you need to not only communicate that, so they also know, because they're going on with their lives. They're not, it's very, it's not often someone will sit there plotting on how to ruin your life or make it hard for you, but it can often feel like that. So to remember that other people have their own lives and that you're also responsible for the reality you want to see happen in and outside the workplace. So being an advocate, taking action in that sense, and also being flexible with what might unravel in that process, right? I like to play with this idea of motherhood or parenthood being expansive as opposed to it being a constricting experience. And I can say that now compared to the first time I became a mom, because then you kind of you kind of shrink. You're like, oh, but I can't stay after work and I can't do this. And you have a long list of all these things you can't do because now you have additional responsibilities, right? But what if you turned that around and made it expansive? As in, I wonder what I can do with the 5 hours I have in the office, the 6 hours, the 7 hours. I wonder who I can call on. I wonder what I can bring from my experience outside the workplace to make this thing better, to make it different. Yeah. I think if we do it that way, turn it into a almost like a game, I think it will be more pleasurable because it's hard as it
I
is.
love
So,
that. I love that. And I think it's like, you know, I hope that everybody listening to this gives themselves a lot of um, love and compassion to let it feel conflicting because, you and I have been moms for a number of years now. So I
yeah.
look back on it now with a different viewpoint than I did when I was trying to fumble through it at the beginning. But I feel like this is just a really, really, it's like a message from your future self to like an
Mhm.
invitation to get more playful and curious and not be afraid of the unknown.
Yes,
The
yes,
unknown isn't it's not bad. It can be expansive. It doesn't have to be restricted.
yes. And we're all trying to get to this destination. When I do this, when baby sleeps, then I can. What about if we journey with new eyes? Then the destination is no longer that place we need to get to in a hurry or perfectly done or, the right way. It's just our way, you know. But can I be aware enough to look around and journey with new eyes? Because each minute is different and there is that opportunity to build and create something, to see something different. And it doesn't mean that it's all going to be great, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be awful either. So yes, expansion, I think it's a beautiful word as you travel from being the person that you think you were to becoming this I wouldn't say new person, but new experiences, new existence, new dimensional traveler, right? Yeah,
Yeah, like we're just adding another dimension to ourselves.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's less exhausting if you can figure out how to weave all of those together and use the parts that align with the time, the situation, the context, rather than having all these boxes that you shut away with a key. I think it's a lot more laborious to dig for all those different parts. Whereas if you accept them, it comes back to what you're saying, that expansion of being. And then you learn a lot better. You can laugh at yourself, like, oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. It's less harsh.
Such a such a release, such a healing part of hard things is to laugh about it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I feel like as we've had this conversation that so much of it is just navigating life. It's
Hmm.
not, necessarily about, mm, you know, honoring your new self as a parent while also honoring your professional hat. It's so universal.
Yeah.
But these four C's, and I'm gonna put all of this in the show notes because I feel like this is an invitation for all of us to do this exercise of get clear, clarify, communicate about it with others so that we're heard, so that we're joined and
Mm.
commit commit to it. I think there's a a piece of me that was really afraid of discipline because I might fail at it.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, that discipline, I started to look at it like making an empowered choice. Like I'm committing
Yes.
to myself and I feel empowered because of this. And then to celebrate it. What is life if we're not stepping back and appreciating the things that come our way that are in alignment, that are wonderful? Um,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
And you can do that in so many ways. I even heard this idea of having a jar in the kitchen or somewhere visible in your house, and you have little notes that you write to yourself, like, well done, Christine, for walking the dog 2 hours extra than, last week. And you just put them in the jar. And the days when you're feeling a bit in the valley, funky, you just go into that jar, you
and
pick
read
up the
them.
notes and read them. Or apps, if people are into, apps, you can just, write a few lines. If people journal, you can do that there. If you have a great friend who has a year, just say, I just want to tell you this thing I did today. Yes, why not? And celebrate, have a party, dance, I don't know, do what it is that you do, bake something yummy. It's all
Yeah,
filling that, bank account so that, because, when you go into withdrawal, you want to have something in there.
yeah, yeah. So, as we close this conversation that I feel like really is such an invitation for all of us, and I feel like first of all, I want to acknowledge that I'm really seeing your contribution as, to the spaces of transitioning into motherhood. This is really, really important because there are a lot of people, and so I can just see how your work with individuals moving into parenthood and moving into this expansion of their professional selves, themselves without children, and now themselves as a parent. This is
Mhm.
really, really important, and so I am just grateful that you are that you're in this world doing this work, and I'm going to make
Oh,
sure that everybody who's listening to this knows how to learn more about you. And I'm Msulle's story, your story is so interesting and beautiful that yeah, I want more people to be able to connect with you. And to close, what would you like people to take? I mean, we've talked about a lot and we've like gone deeper into areas that, I mean, I wasn't sure how exactly this conversation was going to flow, but I always trust that it goes
yes.
where it needs to go. But what would you like your parting words to be for our listeners?
Mm. That you are more than the different titles or the different hats that you wear, you know? And it takes courage sometimes to do and be in joy, and that we need to go beyond ourselves for all of those things to live a fulfilling life. I think we need to call in all the people and the things and the experiences around us with openness, because I think we can beat ourselves up quite a lot. I didn't get that promotion, or I'm a bad mom, my kid is not at this level, or my relationship is not where it needs to be, my romantic relationships or whatever. I think sometimes it does us a lot of good to take a step back and to remember that it is a journey without necessarily getting to this destination. And can we allow ourselves to be expansive enough in that journey so we can look at it and experience it with new eyes and with all our senses, and be a blessing to ourselves and to somebody else. because we all need each other. Yeah. And I'm talking not just our children or our family or our, but to somebody else. Can we extend that piece of us out there? And I think if we all do that, we will alleviate a lot of pain, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for the love that you share. And
Mm.
this has been such a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Christine. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Please read these show notes. They'll have all kinds of good things in it. And we'll see you next time.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Sacred Window podcast is brought to you by the Center for Sacred Window Studies. You can visit us to find out more about our online training and mentoring programs, plus resources and products for and about the sacred postpartum window at www.sacredwindowstudies.com. And our music is written and performed by Sarah Emmett. You can hear more of Sarah's music by visiting www.sarahemmett.bandcamp.com.